First contact scan. The patrol ship of the Vrakesh Collective drifted along the edge of a dead star where light had long stopped shining. Its scanners moved in slow circles, searching for fragments of energy that might be worth collecting. The crew expected silence. Instead, a signal cut through the void, sharp and steady like the heartbeat of something alive. The alien sensors locked on and returned readings that made no sense. There was a ship there, human in shape but built with material that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. It looked as if it were carved out of darkness itself. The Vrakesh captain, Shulk, watched the display with narrow eyes and whispered that no human ship should be this far from their small colonies. He ordered full scan and weapons ready. The scan returned impossible results. The hull appeared alive, shifting in slow motion as though breathing. Energy patterns matched no known drive or weapon. Then the ship sent a calm message in the common trade tongue. The voice was human, female, steady as stone. She said her name was Captain Rhea Vale of the human warship Starborn Forge, and asked the Vrakesh to lower weapons and identify themselves. Her voice carried no fear, no hesitation. It was not a plea, it was a statement. Shulk laughed and said humans should not command warships at all. They were scavengers, planet diggers, and relic traders. He gave the order to approach and capture. The Starborn Forge did not run. It drifted with its lights dimmed, silent and waiting. The Vrakesh ship surrounded it, energy nets spreading like spider silk. Every reading on Shulk's board went white-hot for a second, then flatlined. The human ship vanished from their sensors. No jump signature, no drive flare, no debris. The nets were empty. The bridge fell into silence. One crew member shouted that the human ship had passed through their nets without tearing them. Another screamed that something had touched their mind when the human ship vanished, a whisper that called them by name. Shulk ignored them and demanded logs, but every log file from that minute was corrupted, melted into static. Far away, the Starborn Forge reappeared in the shadow of another dead moon. Rhea Vale stood on the bridge, eyes on the broken beacon floating before her ship. The beacon pulsed softly and spoke in a language that only humans could fully understand, though no one on her crew had ever heard it before. It said a phrase that echoed through the hull and into their bones. Starborn awaken. The fire remembers. Rhea looked at her crew. They were a small group, fewer than 20 souls, but their faces burned with quiet awe. The ship responded to the beacon by growing veins of light along its hull, forming symbols that matched the ancient signal. Rhea ordered the ship to record everything. She knew this was not a chance encounter. Someone, somewhere, had built this beacon and marked it with human DNA patterns long before the current age of spaceflight. She asked Malik, her engineer, to study the signal source. He discovered a map encoded inside, a path of 4 stars that formed a pattern shaped like a spiral hand. Malik said the map could not be random. It was leading them somewhere. Rhea nodded and made the choice to follow it. Back near the dead star, Shulk's superiors demanded an explanation. They dismissed his report as sensor error, but the captain could not forget the whisper that had touched his mind. It said his true name, the one only his mother had spoken. He swore to find that human ship again and expose whatever secret it carried. He ordered his crew to trace every energy ripple and jump distortion. In the darkness of his quarters, he looked at his reflection and felt fear for the first time in his long career. The Starborn Forge turned toward the first point on the map, its light-drinking hull glowing faintly blue as it entered jump. Rhea watched the stars stretch and thought about the beacon's words. If humans were truly starborn, then their past was older and deeper than anyone had guessed. She wondered what the Vrakesh had seen when they scanned her ship and what it meant that they had not fired a shot. The silence of the void wrapped around her, filled with the hum of something ancient awakening. Somewhere ahead lay the truth of why humans were feared, forgotten, and maybe chosen. And in the far dark, the Vrakesh ships began to move again, hunting the ghost that had slipped through their nets. The beacon and the name Starborn. The Starborn Forge came out of jump space near a frozen planet wrapped in pale light from a dying sun. The beacon's signal still pulsed faintly through the ship's sensors, guiding them to a vast structure that hung motionless above the planet's rings. It was not a station nor a ship, but something older and more deliberate, a lattice of silver and stone shaped like a spiral hand, the same pattern that had appeared on their hull. Captain Rhea Vale stood on the bridge, her gaze locked on the ancient monument, while her crew spoke in low voices filled with both awe and unease. She ordered a slow approach and all scanners active, even though she already knew the ship's own strange systems would react before any sensor could. The closer they came, the more the living metal of the forge hummed as though recognizing a friend from another time. Engineer Malik worked at the console, his hands steady, though his heart raced. He said the structure was sending low-frequency signals matching human brainwave patterns. It was trying to speak directly to them, not through language, but through thought and feeling. Rhea gave the order to open comms, but the beacon answered not with words, but images that poured through every mind on the bridge. They saw great ships shaped like stars burning across the black, carrying men and women, whose eyes glowed like suns. They fought creatures made of shadow and hunger, and when the war was lost, they scattered human seeds to the corners of the galaxy. The image burned bright, then faded, leaving silence heavy as gravity. Malik whispered the name that echoed from the beacon's core, Starborn. The ship drifted closer, and a hatch opened on the structure as if inviting them in. Rhea gathered a landing team and descended through the glowing tunnel. Inside, they found walls etched with symbols that shifted when touched and a central chamber that pulsed with soft light. In the center stood a cradle made of black glass big enough to hold a person. Malik placed his hand on it, and it came alive with silver fire scanning his body and projecting streams of data into the air. It spoke this time not in thought but in sound, using a voice that carried warmth like sunlight. It said that the Starborn were the first to carry the forge, the seed of living light that shaped itself to human will. It said that the forge responded to courage and unity, and that its fragments had slept waiting for those who remembered who they were. Rhea asked why humans had been scattered and why the old war had been forgotten. The voice said memory was the price of survival, and that each seed was planted to grow anew when the darkness returned. It warned that the enemy they had once fought was stirring again, and that the Starborn must rise together or be erased forever. Then the cradle dimmed and fell silent. Malik's eyes glowed faintly for a moment before fading. He said he felt as though he had lived 100 lives at once, and that every life had ended defending a flame that must never die. Rhea placed a hand on his shoulder and said the flame still burned. When they returned to the ship, they found the forge had changed. Its hull had grown faint crystalline veins that shimmered like stars, and its engines thrummed with more power than before. Malik called it a living upgrade. The ship's AI reported that its spine drive had evolved to drink light itself, converting radiation directly into thrust. It meant they could now travel farther and faster than any known ship. Rhea understood that the forge was recognizing them as true Starborn and unlocking its full potential step by step. Back near the dead star, the Vrakesh Captain Shock followed their trail. He intercepted fragments of human transmissions from the same sector and pieced together the direction of the forge. His superiors mocked him, saying that chasing ghosts wasted resources, but Shock ignored them. The whisper that had spoken his name still haunted him in his sleep, and he needed to know what human power could touch a Vrakesh mind. He set course for the frozen world with his fleet running dark. On the forge, Rhea stood by the viewport watching the monument shrink behind them. The beacon signal faded, but a new pulse appeared on the map, the second mark glowing brighter than before. She felt both excitement and dread. If the beacon had been right, then humanity had not started its journey among the stars as explorers, but as exile survivors of a war too big to remember. She turned to her crew and said their mission had changed. They were no longer wanderers, they were heirs to a forgotten promise and keepers of a light older than any empire. The crew listened in silence as the stars stretched again and the forge leapt forward into the unknown with the Vrakesh close behind, and the name Starborn echoing in every heart. Trial by Mercy. The Starborn Forge arrived at a hollow moon that orbited a gas giant swirling with green and gold storms. The moon was not dead but alive with strange energy that pulsed through the void like a heartbeat. As soon as the ship entered orbit, the forge's systems began to hum again, recognizing something ancient below. Captain Rhea Vale stood on the bridge, her eyes on the holographic image of the moon's interior, which showed tunnels carved in precise geometric patterns and a single shining core at the center. Malik said it was another beacon, but stronger, more complex, and protected by something that looked like a defense field. Rhea gave the order to prepare for descent, and the ship moved through the field, which parted as if allowing them through. Inside the moon, they found an atmosphere thin but breathable and light that came from no clear source, casting the world in a calm twilight. They landed near the core and found a structure shaped like a tower made of smooth silver stone. When they entered the tower, the floor lit beneath their feet, forming patterns that moved with their steps. A voice filled the air, calm and powerful, saying that this was the Forge trial, built to test the worth of those who claimed the Starborn legacy. Rhea asked what the trial demanded, and the voice answered that only through unity, courage, and mercy could true power be earned. Then the doors behind them sealed, and the light of the room changed from silver to red. Mechanical shapes rose from the ground, forming drones armed with energy cannons. The trial had begun. The crew moved fast, taking defensive positions while Rhea commanded without fear. Malik found that his implant linked directly with the Forge systems, and he could sense the drones before they moved. The first wave attacked fiercely, but Rhea ordered her crew not to destroy them recklessly, instead targeting weapons and limbs, disabling rather than killing. Malik realized the trial was measuring their intent, not their strength. When a group of drones fell disabled, the red light softened and turned pale blue as if approving their restraint. Then a new challenge appeared. Holographic civilians trapped behind collapsing barriers, crying out for help, while drones continued to fire. The crew was forced to divide their attention between fighting and rescuing. Rhea made her choice without hesitation, sending half the team to rescue while the rest covered them. She herself went to pull one of the civilians free, only to realize the hologram could react to her presence with fear and gratitude, as though it were alive. Malik worked through the system, unlocking paths with pure thought, his connection with the Forge deepening until he could feel the rhythm of its code like a song. The final drone fell silent, and the tower's voice returned, saying the trial of mercy was complete, but the trial of resolve remained. The floor opened, revealing an abyss filled with energy storms, and in its center hung a sphere of light that pulsed like a heart. Rhea felt a pull in her mind, urging her to step forward. The voice said that one must offer themselves to guide the Forge reborn. Malik started forward, but Rhea stopped him, saying that command carried the burden and she would take it. As she stepped into the light, she saw flashes of memory, faces of humans from ages past who fought and died to protect the flame. The light entered her mind, filling her with images of other Forges scattered across the galaxy, waiting for awakening. The voice spoke again, saying she had passed the test and earned the right to lead the Starborn, but warned that darkness was near. Above the moon, the Vrakesh fleet arrived, led by Captain Schalk. His ships cut through orbit and fired on the Forge's position, shaking the ground. Inside the tower, alarms screamed and the light of the Forge dimmed. Malik shouted that the Vrakesh were trying to breach the core to steal its energy. Rhea ordered the ship to rise and defend while she and Malik finished the activation sequence. Schalk's voice came through the comms, demanding their surrender and threatening to destroy the moon if they refused. Rhea answered with steady calm, saying that mercy was not weakness and that if he wanted the Forge, he would have to face what it protected. The moon itself began to awaken, its surface cracking open as vast energy shields formed to protect the core. The Forge's power merged with Rhea's ship, creating a storm of light that pushed back the Vrakesh weapons. Schalk could not believe what he saw, a human ship fighting with living fire, as if the void itself obeyed her will. He ordered full retreat, but not before capturing one human shuttle and taking Sarah, Rhea's navigator, prisoner. The battle ended in silence, with the Starborn Forge standing victorious but wounded, and Rhea staring into the stars where the enemy had fled, knowing that Sarah was now in their hands. She made a vow that the next battle would not be fought for survival but for redemption, and that the lesson of mercy would not end with her crew. Rescue, refuge, and a hard choice. The Starborn Forge moved through a stretch of cold, empty space, following the faint trail left by the Vrakesh ships that had taken Sarah. Captain Rhea Vale stood in silence, watching the path ahead, her mind torn between anger and duty. Every moment she thought of her captured navigator, her oldest friend, yet she knew the galaxy had shifted since the trial on the hollow moon. They were now guardians of something greater than vengeance. Malik worked day and night to trace the Vrakesh signals through distorted space. He found signs that led toward a small ice world, hidden beneath a dense radiation belt, a planet that showed weak life signs and fragments of human technology. The Forge responded to the reading as if recognizing home. Rhea ordered descent, though the journey meant risk of burning the ship's new light drive. The world was broken and pale. Its surface was covered in ruins, buried under sheets of frost. Life existed in scattered domes where refugees from many races huddled together, hiding from every empire that had ever ruled the stars. When the Forge entered orbit, the surface transmitters sparked alive with distress calls. Rhea ordered Malik to open channels, and the refugees begged for help, saying their power was failing and their air growing thin. Rhea hesitated because rescuing them would alert the Vrakesh, who had occupied the far side of the planet. Malik said quietly that helping them was not only right, but also the only way to move unnoticed, since the Forge's energy would blend with the rescue emissions. Rhea agreed and landed the ship beside the largest dome. The air inside was cold but breathable. They met the leader of the refugees, a frail elder named Kira, whose people once served the Starborn before the ancient war wiped them out. She recognized the glowing lines on Rhea's uniform and called her Flamebearer, the old title for those who carried the living forge. Rhea listened to Kira's story, how her people had kept old memories alive in whispers and songs, believing one day the Starborn would return. Emotion swelled in the crew when they realized that across the centuries, others had waited for humanity to wake again. Rhea promised help, and Malik began teaching the engineers how to use simple fragments of the Forge's living metal to rebuild their life support. Meanwhile, Sarah remained prisoner aboard, Shock's ship chained in a room filled with shadows. The Vrakesh captain questioned her, demanding to know what the Forge truly was. Sarah refused every time, though she knew the price. Shock was not cruel by pleasure, but by fear. He felt something inside the human ship had touched his mind during their last battle, and it terrified him. He wanted to destroy what he did not understand. When he received word that the Forge had landed, he ordered a trap. He would allow the humans to finish their repairs, then strike when their defenses were low. Back in the refugee camp, Malik discovered hidden passages below the dome leading to old Starborn technology, buried deep under the ice. He called Rhea down to see it. What they found was a Forge fragment smaller than their ship, but alive and pulsing with the same rhythm. Malik said they could use it to amplify the ship's systems, but it would take hours to connect. Rhea agreed but warned him to stay hidden. While they worked, Sarah managed to send a coded transmission through the prisoner network. It was short and simple, only a single message telling Rhea not to risk the refugees for her sake. Rhea read it in silence and said softly that no human would be left behind no matter the cost. The Vrakesh attack came at dawn. Fire fell from the sky as their ships broke through the clouds. The refugees panicked, but Rhea took command, guiding them to shelter, while the Forge rose from its dock, glowing brighter than ever. Malik triggered the fragment's power, linking it to their ship and forming a shield of living light that spread over the camp. The Vrakesh weapons struck, but the light bent and turned their fire away. Rhea ordered a counter-move, not of destruction but confusion, using the Forge's light to create a swarm of false signals across the horizon. The enemy's sensors filled with ghosts, and in the chaos, Rhea launched a decoy pod, broadcasting the same energy signature as the ship. Shock took the bait and captured the pod, believing he had caught Rhea herself. When he opened it, he found only a cold metal core, pulsing with a message that played. In his mind, Rhea's voice saying, "Mercy is not weakness and truth cannot be caged." Enraged, he fired on the surface one last time, then retreated into the storm, believing the Forge destroyed. But beneath the ice, the real ship emerged, untouched, the refugees safe, and the new fragment fully fused with their systems. The Forge now burned with blue and silver light strong enough to make the stars shimmer in answer. Rhea watched the sky and whispered that the fight had only begun. Malik looked at her and asked what they would do now that Shock had escaped. She answered without pause they would find the next ark before he did and awaken it, because the galaxy needed to remember what humanity truly was: not conquerors, not saviors, but builders of light who never abandoned those in the dark. The Ark of Asho. Starborn Forge left the frozen world, behind carrying the hope and gratitude of the refugees who had rebuilt their domes and their lives with the knowledge of the Forge. Captain Rhea Vale stood on the bridge staring at the star map projected in 3 dimensions above the console. The signal of the next arc pulsed stronger. Then before a planet hidden inside volcanic clouds, a world of molten rock and ash that seemed alive with heat and threat. Rhea said that the crew would need to be ready for anything, because an ark was never unguarded and the Vrakesh were already in pursuit. Malik adjusted the light drive to compensate for the interference of the volcanic storms ahead and reported that the ship's living hull was adapting to the extreme heat, converting the radiation into protective energy fields. Rhea nodded and ordered the course set for the outer rim of the volcanic world. When they arrived, the planet was a churning landscape of fire rivers and ash clouds so thick they could barely see the surface. The Forge lowered its shield slightly to let the sensors pierce the veil of smoke. Below them lay an ark buried beneath a dome of volcanic glass, a sleeping city that had not awakened in thousands of cycles. The ark hummed faintly with ancient energy. Rhea gave orders to land on a plateau near the edge of a lava flow, while Malik and the engineers prepared the living armor of the ship to absorb the constant heat. Every system on the forge pulsed as if anticipating the moment of contact, and the crew felt a quiet awe knowing that inside the ark were humans from the ancient war whose memories had been lost to the stars. As they approached the surface, Shock's fleet appeared through the storms like dark vultures. His dreadnought was the largest vessel they had ever faced, its hull thick with armor and weapons ready to fire on the slightest signal. Rhea called the crew to stations and said that this time they would fight not only for themselves, but for the sleeping ark, and for every human seed scattered across the galaxy. Malik worked in sync with the ship's core, sending pulses of living light along the hull, creating patterns that confused the targeting systems of the Vrakesh ships. The forge seemed to listen to his thoughts, turning the chaos of battle into a rhythm that it could control. Rhea stood on the bridge, guiding the ship through the storms, the lava flows reflected in the crystalline hull of the forge, making it glow brighter than the dying sun. The ark itself stirred as they landed. Ancient doors slid open, revealing corridors that shimmered with energy, dormant for millennia. The crew entered and found chambers filled with sleeping humans, their faces serene, their DNA encoded in the very walls. Malik traced the flow of energy through the ark and discovered a manual, a sequence of commands that would awaken the ark without harm. It required perfect timing and coordination with the forge's living systems. Rhea assigned teams to each section while she and Malik worked in the control center linking the ship to the ark. The energy of the forge spread into the chambers, flowing into every human seed, and the planet seemed to respond, rising slightly as if acknowledging the arrival of its guardian. Shock's dreadnought fired on the plateau, shaking the ground and sending streams of molten rock toward the forge. The crew responded by projecting shields of living light, forming walls that redirected the lava and absorbed the shock. The smaller Vrakesh ships moved in to attack, and Malik created bursts of false signals, leading them into each other. Rhea ordered the crew to remain calm and precise, knowing that panic would destroy the delicate synchronization needed to awaken the ark. Slowly, the chambers filled with light, and the first humans began to stir, their eyes glowing, faintly as if remembering something long lost. Sarah appeared among the awakened humans, guiding them and smiling briefly at Rhea, before returning to help the others. The battle above continued. Vrakesh ships attempted boarding but found themselves met with corridors of shifting light and gravity manipulated by the forge itself. Rhea realized that the ark was not just a city, but a weapon of knowledge and will. The human seeds within responded to the presence of the Starborn, and the ship's hull pulsed in resonance with their awakening. Shock grew frustrated and ordered a direct strike at the central chamber, but Malik diverted the energy of the forge to form a protective cocoon. Rhea activated the emergency core of the ship, sending waves of living light across the plateau, forcing the enemy to retreat temporarily. The ark had awakened, but the cost was clear. The forge's hull was scorched and energy reserves. Rhea gathered the crew and spoke with calm authority, reminding them that the Starborn promise was not just survival, but awakening every ark in the galaxy. They would not leave the ark to slumber while the Vrakesh hunted them. Each member of the crew understood the weight of the task and prepared for repairs, while Malik integrated the ark's energy with the forge, making the ship stronger and more responsive than before. They repaired shields and light conduits while Sarah coordinated the newly awakened humans, teaching them to stabilize their environment and defend themselves. The feeling of unity was overwhelming as the forge hummed and the ark vibrated in answer. Shock retreated into the storms, but his eyes burned with a desire for vengeance and understanding. He realized that defeating the humans would not be done by brute force. The Starborn had proven that they were more than ships, more than weapons. They were living history capable of awakening the past to fight for the future. Rhea swore an oath in the control center to awaken every ark to end the hunt and bring humanity's scattered children together, not as soldiers, but as guardians of light. The crew listened in silence as the forge's living core pulsed beneath their feet, stronger than ever as the newly awakened ark began to shine through the volcanic clouds, signaling to the distant stars that the Starborn had returned and would not be forgotten. Edge of dark and the greater enemy, the Starborn forge left the arc of ash behind its hull, glowing faintly in the wake of the volcanic clouds, carrying the energy of 1,000 awakening humans. Captain Rhea Vale stared out at the edge of the galaxy where light grew thin and stars turned pale as if hiding from the void beyond. The star map pulsed again, showing the second arc buried in the rim, a library world untouched for millennia, containing knowledge older than most empires could imagine. Malik adjusted the ship's living systems, preparing for extreme conditions as the forge adapted to the cold and radiation of the galactic edge. Rhea called the crew together, reminding them that each arc they awakened brought hope, but also risk. The Vrakesh were relentless, and something older lurked in the dark, a predator that had fed on civilizations before humans had even dreamed of the stars. When they approached the second arc, the planet came into view, a frozen library, suspended over a field of black asteroids, its spires and towers glowing faintly with stored energy. The forge responded to the energy like a heartbeat, recognizing a kinship older than the stars themselves. Rhea ordered a cautious descent, and Malik guided the ship through gravitational currents that threatened to tear them apart. When they landed, the surface opened into caverns lined with shelves taller than mountains carved from crystal and metal. Every shelf contained records of human and alien civilizations, some lost to time, others forgotten in the scattering of starborn seeds. The crew moved carefully, feeling the weight of knowledge pressing on their minds. As if the planet itself could judge their worth, Rhea activated the arc, carefully linking it with the forge, and the chambers pulsed with light as holographic interfaces appeared, showing histories and warnings. The voice of the arc spoke, saying that humans had been seeded across the galaxy because they carried a spark that resisted the null tide, a predator that consumed star mines and left civilizations hollowed. It explained that the Vrakesh once bargained with the tide and now feared the ignition of human potential. Rhea realized the weight of the task. Awakening the arcs did not just oppose one enemy, but challenged the predator lurking in the dark. She felt doubt creep into her heart, wondering if the light they were carrying could survive the darkness, or if awakening it would call forces beyond their understanding. As they worked, Shock's dreadnought emerged from behind an asteroid belt, cutting across the dark void. He had discovered the second arc before they could fully integrate it, and intended to destroy or capture it. The forge pulsed in response, and Malik initiated a shield network drawing on the arc's stored energy, connecting it to the ship and the nearby asteroid field, creating a labyrinth of light and shadow. The Vrakesh ships moved into the trap, sending weapons fire that bounced harmlessly off shifting shields. Rhea coordinated the defense with precision, using patterns of movement taught by the forges, pulse guiding the crew and the awakened humans in perfect harmony. The nulltide made its presence known when a pulse of darkness passed through the system, erasing distant stars and threatening to swallow the light of the forge. Rhea felt it in her mind, a cold emptiness that whispered of inevitability, yet the human connection to the forge resisted the pull. She understood then that humans had been scattered not to hide but to survive, and to carry a spark that could fight the tide when the time came. The crew felt the weight of the legacy as energy from the arc and the forge merged, forming a barrier against the darkness and giving them a moment to breathe. The battle continued, with the dreadnought attempting to force a strike into the arc's central core, but the crew used clever maneuvers, baiting it into the asteroid labyrinth while projecting holographic decoys from the arc's library, records confusing the enemy sensors. Rhea's plan worked, drawing the dreadnought into a trap where it collided with a field of living energy reflected by the forge, turning its own weapons against it. The enemy was forced to retreat, but the action revealed the location of the last two arcs across the sector to anyone watching. Rhea knew that the stakes were higher now. Every move would be observed by rivals and the null tide alike, and each decision carried the weight of awakening humanity's legacy while avoiding annihilation. The crew gathered in the control center, the forge humming beneath them, resonating with the awakened arc. Rhea said that the darkness beyond was real and ancient, but that humans carried a fire that could stand against it. She spoke of unity, of purpose, courage, and the need to awaken the final arcs, knowing that their actions would shape not only their fate, but the fate of countless worlds. Malik worked with the arc systems, creating a feedback loop to stabilize the light, while Sarah coordinated the newly awakened humans, teaching them to channel the energy safely. Outside, the void seemed quieter, yet filled with tension, as if waiting to see if the Starborn would rise or be swallowed by the shadows. They carried the knowledge of ages and the power of life itself, and they prepared to take the next step into the unknown, trusting in the human spark that had endured every test and every war and would endure the trials yet to come. The Starborn stand. The Starborn Forge glided into the system where the third and fourth arcs lay hidden, a constellation of ancient structures that had waited for centuries to awaken. Captain Rhea Vale stood on the bridge, feeling the weight of every choice that had led them here. The forge pulsed under her feet, alive with the energy of two awakened arcs and the living light of the ship itself. Her crew moved with quiet precision, each knowing their role in what could be the final confrontation with the Vrakesh and the threat of the null tide. Malik monitored the energy fields linking the arcs to the forge, while Sarah coordinated teams of humans newly awakened from the previous arcs, training them to stabilize the systems and defend themselves. Rhea's eyes scanned the sensors, and she saw the Vrakesh fleet closing in, larger and more desperate than before, and beyond that, a faint pulse of darkness spreading from the edge of the sector, signaling that the null tide had taken notice. The first Vrakesh ships entered the system, striking toward the arcs, attempting to prevent their awakening. Rhea issued orders calmly and decisively, directing the forge to project fields of living light around each arc, creating a shield network that bent enemy weapons and obscured the true position of the awakened humans. The crew used every skill they had learned in the trials at the Hollow Moon, and the Ark of Ash exploiting the Vrakesh reliance on brute force. They lured ships into ambushes using decoys and holographic projections pulled from the archives of the second arc, disorienting the attackers and giving the humans time to stabilize the arcs. Rhea felt the pulse of the third arc beneath them, responding to her presence, linking with the forge, as if it knew that she carried the promise of the Starborn in her hands. Shock appeared, leading a final wave of dreadnoughts determined to crush the humans once and for all. He hailed Rhea, demanding surrender and threatening to destroy the awakened arcs and everyone aboard the forge. Rhea answered with steady resolve, saying that no Starborn would kneel, and that the light they carried could not be caged. She offered Shock a choice to fight together against the greater darkness, but he refused, preferring death over alliance. The Vrakesh attacked, and the forge and arcs responded with living light, forming walls and blades of energy that cut through the void. Humans from the awakened arcs moved with Rhea's crew, their courage and ingenuity turning simple tactics into brilliant maneuvers. The forge pulsed like a heart, coordinating their actions, weaving together shields, weapons, and energy flows in perfect harmony. The null tide sent a probe fleet into the system, a wave of dark tendrils reaching for the minds of humans and machinery alike. The pulse of the arcs flared, and Rhea realized that awakening them had drawn the attention of something older and more dangerous. She ordered the crew to synchronize with the living light using patterns learned from the Hollow Moon trial. Every human in the system felt the connection, the pulse of life and memory binding them together, creating a wall of living thought and energy that the tide could not penetrate. The Vrakesh ships fell back, unable to withstand the combined ingenuity and courage of humans, linked to the power of the Starborn. Shock's dreadnought broke under its own attacks from miscalculated fire and false readings. He fell not by sword or weapon, but by his own refusal to change. The battle ended not in destruction but in awakening. The arcs opened fully and broadcast their knowledge across the stars, sending light and understanding to humans who had survived in scattered isolation for centuries. Rhea's voice carried through the system, saying that every human, every small voice mattered, and that the Starborn promise was to protect, to awaken, and to unite. The newly awakened humans took their first steps among the stars, sharing the lessons of the Forge, and spreading hope to those who had never seen light beyond the shadow of empires. The Starborn Forge carried Rhea and her crew to the edge of dark, space beyond any map known to mortals, carrying the living light of humanity, and the oath that no ark would remain asleep, no human would be left in shadow, and the fire of the Starborn would continue to burn brighter than the void itself. As the system fell quiet, the Forge set a course for the unknown, the arcs following in silent orbit, a testament to what humanity could achieve. The Starborn had returned, not to conquer, but to stand, to teach, and to remind the galaxy that even in darkness the spark of life and courage could never be extinguished. Rhea looked at her crew and the newly awakened humans and said that this was only the beginning, that the light they carried would travel further than any weapon, stronger than any fear, and that they were the guardians of a promise older than the stars. The Vrakesh were gone for now. The null tide held at bay, and humanity had risen not as subjects but as Starborn, united, brilliant and unstoppable across the cosmos. Final stand and the dawn of Starborn. The Starborn Forge drifted silently, at the edge of the system where the fourth arc lay, hidden a planet of swirling mist and faint auroras that glimmered like fire across the frozen surface. Captain Rhea Vale stood on the bridge, her hands resting lightly on the console, feeling the pulse of the ship beneath her feet and the steady heartbeat of the arcs aligning with the forge itself. The crew moved like shadows in perfect harmony, each knowing the stakes and the weight of history they carried on their shoulders. Beyond the sensors, the void stretched cold and empty, but alive with the hum of distant stars and the whisper of dangers that had waited patiently for humans to awaken. Fully, Rhea watched the faint glow of the fourth arc below, knowing it held memories and power that could either save the galaxy or destroy it if misused. She called her crew together, reminding them that every choice from the frozen world to the Ark of Ash to the library planet had led them here. They were not alone, for the humans, awakened from previous arcs, had joined them, moving with courage and understanding that the light they carried was their shield and their weapon simultaneously. Malik adjusted the living systems of the forge, weaving the energy of the awakened humans into the hull, creating a resonance that made the ship pulse like a breathing being. The harmony of energy and thought spread through the arcs like a wave responding to the Starborn will. From the shadows of deep space, the null tide advanced, sending tendrils of dark energy that reached for the minds of the humans and the ship itself. Shock appeared once more, his dreadnought trailing smaller vessels, desperate to strike a blow before the humans could unite fully. He hailed Rhea, demanding surrender, promising annihilation and chaos. But she responded with unwavering calm, saying that no Starborn would kneel, and that their light could never be caged. She offered alliance against the tide, but he refused, clinging to fear and old hatred. The attack began, and the living light of the forge expanded outward, forming shields and blades of energy that cut through the void and deflected every assault of the enemy. The awakened humans moved in synchrony with the crew, creating patterns of movement and defense that turned ordinary tactics into extraordinary brilliance. Their courage amplified the forge's pulse, and the arcs resonated in reply, forming a lattice of living light that held the Vrakesh fleet at bay and resisted the dark probes of the null tide. Shock's ships faltered and collapsed upon themselves, unable to contend with the unity of human ingenuity and the living power of the Starborn. The fourth arc began to awaken, its light spilling across the planet, bathing the frozen surface in warmth and clarity, revealing structures and energy conduits that had waited for centuries to pulse again with life and purpose. Rhea stood at the command chair, feeling the energy of the forge, the pulse of the arcs, and the thoughts of the awakened humans converge into a single current of will. She realized that the true power of the Starborn was not the ships or the arcs, but the spirit of humanity itself, the courage to rise despite fear, the will to protect, and the determination to awaken light in the darkest corners of the galaxy. With a final pulse, she synchronized the forge with all four arcs, creating a beacon of living energy visible across the sector, calling to scattered humans and allies alike to stand and follow the Starborn way. The Vrakesh had been defeated not by destruction, but by the brilliance of humanity united. The null tide recoiled at the wall of living thought it could not consume. The arcs pulsed in rhythm with the forge, sending light and knowledge across the stars, and the Starborn had fulfilled the promise of awakening every seed of humanity. Rhea turned to her crew and the awakened humans and said that the journey was only beginning, that they would continue to explore, awaken, and teach across the cosmos, that the fire of the Starborn would never fade, and that even in the darkest reaches of space life, courage and hope could rise stronger than any shadow. The Starborn Forge set course beyond the mapped galaxy, carrying the legacy of humanity and the power of the awakened arcs. The light of the Starborn spread outward, a reminder to all that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire capable of changing worlds, and that those who carried it were never alone. The crew moved through the stars, together united in purpose and spirit, and the arcs followed, leaving trails of living energy that would guide future generations. The galaxy had been shown the power of humanity not as conquerors but as guardians, teachers, and builders of light, and the Starborn would continue to rise wherever they were needed. The end.